Diffusion, the international science radio show.
We have a bouncer on the doors of perception.
The good, the bad, the ugly.
It gets pretty exciting.
The myths, the truths.
Toxicology.
Astroseismology.
Magnetism. The dark side.
Genetically engineered potatoes.
Planetoid.
Planetoid.
I love that word.
Hello and welcome to Diffusion. Sit back and relax while we entwine your brain with weird and wonderful science. I'm Ian Woolf. On this edition, Scopus Award runner-up Vivian Tam talks about recycling buildings. And Tim Baynes talks with Virginia Shepherd about fun fungi. If only there was a use for all this extra carbon dioxide we're dumping in the air. And if only building materials could be recycled. Professor Vivian Tam from Western Sydney University won the runner-up Scopus Award for Excellence in Creating a Sustainable Future for her invention of CO2 Concrete. I began by asking her, what is carbon dioxide concrete?
We have recently invented CO2 concrete. CO2 concrete is injecting carbon dioxide into the recycled aggregate for the concrete productions. Normally, if we're using the recycled aggregate just by itself, the strength is lower by 30%. By injecting carbon dioxide to produce this CO2 concrete, the strength actually already merge virgin concrete and also have a 10% cost reduction.
Before your invention, if people wanted to recycle concrete, they could do it, but it would be a third less strong, it'd be 30% weaker. But with your invention injecting the CO2, it's just as good.
Yeah, exactly what I'm doing there, because there's a lot of people using recycled aggregate already, and then to produce recycled concrete all over the world. But if we just purely using the waste as the concrete materials, they cannot help in the performance. That's why I'm doing the invention and the technology improvement by injecting carbon dioxide in, and they just obviously save the landfill space and also use the carbon dioxide that would otherwise will go to the atmosphere, and then we produce the CO2 concrete that is as strong as what other materials can be and is cheap as well.
And so there's obviously a chemical reaction. What is the new substance that the CO2 with the old aggregate forms? What do you call it?
There's no secret in here, to be honest. We have something called calcium hydroxide in the cement paste, in the old cement paste of recycled aggregate. We just add carbon dioxide in and become the calcium carbonate. Calcium carbonate is the one that can make the concrete strong. But the thing is how you can make more calcium carbonates. That will be the secrets that I'm doing.
So you're making calcium carbonate by using carbon dioxide, and where do you get the CO2?
The CO2 is just from the atmosphere. At the moment, we bought it from the available shop, but what we call BOC, what BOC actually collecting from, and they are actually from collecting the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and then they try to do some of the treatment, and then they produce the BOC, and we use the BOC for the CO2 concrete productions at the moment.
So is this a way to capture some carbon dioxide from waste emissions?
Yeah, at the moment, what BOC is, they actually capture the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. But there's another kind of technologies in here as well. Like a lot of people try to use different ways to capture the carbon dioxide, but we didn't go through those technologies. We are actually using those already captured, and then we just use it for the concrete productions for this project.
And what inspired you to start this project?
I do recycled concrete quite a long time already. I started when I was a PhD student, which is about 18-20 years ago. And I do different kind of inventions throughout my research period. I always feel like that why we have to put the waste into the landfill, and the landfill is running out. What can we do with those wastes? And what else we can do if we want to reuse it? That's not as easy as you could imagine if you just reuse the waste products. And that is my thinking behind it. Like, I want to use the waste as good as the natural products. But the thing is, my also bottom line is I don't want to produce other type of waste when I'm production of these products. And I also want to be cheap, because otherwise the industry couldn't be able to pick it up to make the real impact.
And isn't there an urgent need to recycle the aggregate from demolished buildings? Because my understanding is that if you're creating concrete for buildings, it uses things like sand, and we're sort of getting short of a lot of these ingredients if we keep using new materials every single time.
Sand is the very typical examples that we are running out of it, but unfortunately, recycled aggregate is not as short. Virgin aggregate is not as shortage compared to the other materials, because we do have the landfill space in Australia to put all the different damaged concrete waste there. But doesn't mean that you need to stop this research, because one day, sooner or later, you will need that, and research takes some time for us to investigate as well.
Tell me about the impact of your work.
We started work about 2 years ago, and actually this project got picked up by a company called Innovise in South Australia, because they are running a commercialization program which is called Waste and Technology. I don't think I picked the name right. It's running by Innovise, and then they run a commercialization program, and that project was actually funded by the South Australian green industry as well. At that time that we start looking into the research projects actually can go further and trying to look at how can we actually commercialize the products, because the products we are doing experiment at that time. What else we can do at the moment is really just an experiment, and we can do fantastic results, but what else we can do? And since that we have actually have a startup company started in January 2018 called EcoBond, and then with Western Sydney University, they also provide a lot of support for me as well. We have a farm in Hawkesbury in our campus, and I start doing something that's about 40 by 50 centimeters slabs. We call it as a footbath. What I'm using it for is for people to enter and exit the farm, and then they need to wash the boots. They clean the boots before they go inside and outside. But this year, March, we actually upgrade the CO2 concrete productions, become 3 meters by 3 meters. What we're using that slabs for is we actually putting the cow drinking stations on top of it, and then the cow will stand on there to drink the water. You can see that each bull is about a ton weight, and about 5-6 bulls actually can sit on the slabs to drink the water, and that's why it's a weight test. It's about 5-6 tons weight test on that, and we are actually looking forward to keep producing further, and we're also looking for some industry partners for the slabs. We're actually already working with Volumetric Concrete Australia, and we're also looking into any other possibilities that we can go further with these CO2 concrete implementations as well.
Where will we be using CO2 concrete?
As I mentioned, CO2 concrete actually has already have a matching strength with a cost reduction as well. This CO2 concrete actually can use for anywhere that concrete needs, no matter it's low grade or high grade. You use building, making slabs or making columns, anywhere that concrete needs, this CO2 concrete to be able to compensate what we need as well, and in an economical way and environmental way.
So we should be using it for everything, because we've already got all the old concrete from all the buildings we knocked down, and if it's cheaper and just as good, why not?
Exactly what I'm trying to promote at the moment, but at the moment I have quite a lot of hesitation from the industry, because we didn't really have a lot of productions, didn't really have that confidence that built up by the industry. But I would say that is the reason that Western Sydney University is helping me to put more implementation in the Hawkesbury farm at this stage. And also we're looking into partnering with a lot of companies to see whether we can do a lot more trials or examples or case studies to actually boost up the confidence for the industry to further use it. By talking about if we are using CO2 concrete compared to using the virgin materials, the difference is a long-term perspective. You may be thinking about, we're using a little bit of waste, we can save a little bit of money, but what actually can go further? I have another kind of expertise is life cycle analysis, because I like to look into the life cycle perspectives. If you want to talk about sustainability, it's always about life cycle perspectives. I've done the research related to if I using the virgin material compared to the CO2 concretes, the difference are huge, because if you use the virgin materials, it will have the cost, but if you use the recycled materials, particularly CO2 concrete, we actually have the benefits from that. That means it's a positive compared to a big negative. There's a big gap in there. That is the reason that you can see we're using the recycled materials, not only about saving the short-term perspective, it's more important, the long-term perspective as well.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That was Scopus Award runner-up Professor Vivian Tam from Western Sydney University, recycling building materials and taking carbon dioxide out of the air to make stronger concrete. You're listening to Ian Woolf on Diffusion Science Radio. Send emails to science@diffusionradio.com. We're brought to you across Australia on the Community Radio Network and podcast over the internet on www.diffusionradio.com. What's fun about fungi? Here's Tim Baynes from deep within the Diffusion archives, speaking with Dr. Virginia Shepherd, who was working at the Department of Biophysics at the University of New South Wales way back then.
I remember in one of my early high school science classes, the teacher was talking about the classification of living things on this planet. She said there was the kingdom of animals and the kingdom of plants, and I thought this was all pretty easy to understand because I had a good idea of what an animal and a plant looked like. Then the teacher kind of shuffled her feet coyly and said, "And then there are fungi." My mind reeled at the thought that there could be a whole separate kingdom dedicated solely to these little spongy umbrella-shaped oddballs when I could think of gazillions of different types of animals and plants. To really understand this apparently glaring oversight, I guess you'd have to talk to someone who loves fungi, an expert like Dr. Virginia Shepherd from the University of New South Wales. How long have you been studying fungus?
I've had a long-standing love affair with what used to be called the lower organisms, probably since I was about 10 years old.
What got you started at the age of 10 into fungus and the lower organisms?
Well, I think it actually started for me with a kind of what you might call a higher organism called an ostracod, which is a kind of little crustacean that lives in ponds. And my brother and I collected some tadpoles, and I noticed these little specks swimming in the water, and it just went on from there. So I realised there's a world inside this one, and it's more weird and strange than any surrealist could have ever imagined. So
and then presumably someone gave you a microscope, and it was all over.
I begged for a microscope. My father got me a microscope, and of course the ostracods were a bit big to look at under the microscope. So I then got into much smaller things, the protozoa, and I've built on that to get into fungi, and predominantly algae I think are my favourite beasts.
Algae, okay. So where's the fun in fungi?
Where's the fun in fungi?
The algae you study.
Well, you'd say the fun in fungi, imagine a world without them. We would have no beer, no Vegemite.
No beer?
There would be piles of feces as tall as buildings all around us, and you wouldn't be able to see them for all the logs of fallen trees that nothing could have decayed. So yes, they play a vital role.
This is the importance of fungi.
This is why they're important.
And then there's nasty fungi as well, I imagine. There's
the fungus that ate my face. Yes, they're a fungi that unfortunately they can see the human body as a food source and a surface to break down and feed upon. And
okay. So what's some fabulous fungus? A
fabulous fungus, this is one anybody can probably find for themselves. You just need a few pieces of wallaby dung or cow poo or horse droppings which have come from animals not in a stable, so eating grass outside. And people have probably even seen these. If you look at a piece of wallaby dung out in the bush and it's got like a white fur on the surface, you've probably seen this particular fungus. So you look at it closer up, it's called Pilobolus, which means hat tosser. And what you see is a transparent stalk with a nice swollen vesicle on top of that. And on top of that, what looks like a little beret, a little black beret, which contains the spores, the hat. And this is a remarkable thing. The swollen vesicle acts as a lens. And underneath that there's a little collar, a little yellow collar, which has got carotenoid pigments that can catch waves of light. And the light is focused onto this collar by the vesicle acting like a lens. And the effect of this is that the little polobolus bends towards the light to the point when the vesicle is actually shadowing the pigment and it bends no more. It can build up a massive pressure. It builds up a massive pressure inside itself, mainly by having sugars. So it's got a lot of sugars inside this vesicle and the little stalk. And when that explodes, it finally explodes after it's bent to its fullest extent, usually around noon. I mean, it follows a specific
doesn't take
cycle.
a long time. It just is it a matter of hours it does this?
It takes a little while. Overnight you can get the...
No, but it's not like a month where it builds up and does it. This
no,
thing grows.
You can grow it on a piece of toilet paper yourself. The wallaby dung on that, bit of moisture and a light coming from one direction.
So what happens to the hat? What happens? Tell me about the hat.
Well, this thing builds up this incredible pressure inside. The vesicle then explodes and the hat is tossed. The hat containing the spores of the fungus is tossed up to 2 metres, which is a long, long way for such a tiny thing to be tossed.
Yeah.
And it actually can shoot a cow, so it can pepper a cow with spores. But the main idea is that the spores will then hit some blades of grass. They've got a sticky mucilage goo on the surface. They stick to the grass, and another cow, wallaby, horse, herbivore eats the grass. The spore is resistant to being digested. It comes out in the next load of poo, and the whole cycle starts again.
A poo-loving, hat-popping fungus.
Yeah, got it. You could say a coprophagous, a poo-eating. Many fungi like to live on and eat poo, and thank heavens that they do.
Tell me, okay, this is what's confused me from an early age. What is it about a fungus that makes it not an animal, not a plant, that's something special that we have to, I mean, apart from the wonderful properties these organisms have, what's the essence of it that, in the cells, or what is it that makes it not like any other animal or plant?
It has its own kingdom, the mycota. Well, they have actually in the past been poetically described as animals trapped in tubes, but they are quite different to animals. They're completely unlike plants, although they're usually studied by people who are doing botany and things like that. They're completely unlike plants. They have no chloroplast, so they can't photosynthesize, they can't make their own food. They have to basically get it from their environment by eating things which have already made that food. But I think, well, they live in, the tubes they live in are made of chitin, which is the same stuff that lobsters' claws and
Chitin's
nails
a fabulous bit of material you find all over the place, isn't it?
Indestructible, practically, yes.
Is that the same thing as fingernails, or have I got that wrong?
No, that's keratin.
Keratin.
Yeah.
Chitin. Hey, I could get that wrong easily.
They do sound alike, but no, arthropods and insects and things will make their shell out of chitin, and so do the fungi. And they form what is called hyphae. They're not really considered to be true cells in that sense. So they form these long, tip-growing, tubular structures, very, very tiny, I might say, maybe 5 to 10 microns across, which is, if you took a human hair and chopped it into maybe 100 bits, we're talking very thin, very small, and they grow only at the tips. So they have their own older parts of themselves are left behind as they keep growing. So
kind of like a tree. I mean, that's
yes,
left
in
behind
a way,
inwards. The xylem and phloem of trees are.
That also, the roots and shoots also have a kind of tip growth.
Yeah.
But the fungus, what else makes it special? Well, I guess if we talk about ourselves as animals, we have a fixed number of chromosomes. We are a diploid organism. We have 2 sets of chromosomes, one from mum, one from dad. And we produce eggs and sperm. They then are reunited, and this leads to the growth of another human being. And it's quite different for the fungi. The most advanced kinds, or thought of as advanced, though I hate using these words, are the kinds called basidiomycetes. They're the ones that make what you see as a mushroom, the classic mushroom.
So is that so is some part of the mushroom chitin there? Is that right?
The whole thing is made up. That entire beautiful, incredibly complex structure is made up of the little hyphae all meshing around each other. So you get them all entwining to build the stalk and the gills and the little cap.
Because it does seem like there's different tissue in a mushroom. There's a stalk, like you say, and there's the gill and so forth. But it's all one organism that just is forming different structures, all...
Well, yeah, and it's just these hyphae, these incredibly little tiny hair-like structures wrapped in chitin that all enfold around one another and create these incredibly complex, beautiful structures. But what I was going to say there that makes them very different to animals is in this sort of fairly advanced group, the basidiomycetes, you have a state called the dikaryon. That means there's a nucleus from mum, there's a nucleus from dad, but they never actually fuse. And so the organism has these two nuclei always there in the hyphae, and every time it wants to grow longer, it has to make a new cell wall and grow another, a few centimetres into the ground. It has to form this incredibly complicated little, like a little elbow or a little arm called the clamp connection, so that one nucleus can piggyback around the other, and the new cell, or not really a cell, but the new bit of the hypha ends up with one nucleus from mum and one nucleus from dad. And it's only at the very end of this process, when the mushroom or the fruiting body comes up, that at the end of the gills we have the actual little spores. Each of the spores has a nucleus either from mum or from dad. And when they germinate, they form what is called the monokaryon, and that is a hypha that has only the one nucleus. And that must find a partner and fuse together with it.
So that's a haploid number of...
that's a haploid state.
Meets another
one.
Spore.
They fuse together and you get a new, what is called a mycelium. So when you have all the hyphae growing together in an organised body, you have this thing called a mycelium.
These fungus, they're like animals? They're diploid? Is that right?
Well, no, I think this is one of the defining reasons why they're not animals, that though in these very advanced ones you do get these two nuclei, the nuclei never actually fuse together, so it never becomes truly diploid, and that's why it's called dikaryotic. In the old days of early microscopists, they noticed some cells had like a little nut inside, it looked like a little hazelnut. That was the nucleus, and that's where the word karyon comes from, meaning eukaryotes are the things that have the nut, and the prokaryotes have no nut, which is actually the nucleus. So when you have a dikaryon, you have two nuts, or actually two nuclei that never actually become one. So it's the identities of the two parents remain in the one organism, but as separate things.
That's fascinating. I didn't know where the karyon came from, or the eukaryotic or prokaryotic. I knew those names, but didn't know where they came from.
And I might say a mycelium can be massive, so simply because they're under the ground and we don't really see them, we only see the fruiting body. That's the tiniest part, really. So the mycelium can go under the road, it can connect all the trees in a forest, for example, in these situations.
That sounds huge. It's one connected organism, essentially.
One massive organism, yeah, and I think the world record there is our society's obsessed with what's the biggest. So a few years ago, some people worked out that it's actually a pathogen, this honey fungus, Armillaria, was the world's biggest organism. They did a genetic analysis of the hyphae, Armillaria hyphae, in this particular area, and found that this massive, creature, I like to think of it as, kind of under the ground.
The creature under the ground.
You got it.
Armillaria, not related to malaria.
Armillaria. Yeah, not related to malaria. No,
okay.
Just a fungus. You've probably seen it. It's actually very bad for trees and it kills them, unfortunately, but it has quite a bright yellow fruiting body which will appear. But you got to remember, under the soil, that could go for miles. So they worked out that this particular beast, this particular Armillaria, under the soil, probably weighed about 10,000 kilograms, and it went for 15 hectares, and it was probably...
That's not knocking around, is it?
1,500 years old.
Wow.
So it's been there a long time.
That was Dr. Tim Baynes speaking with Dr. Virginia Shepherd about fungi from deep within the Diffusion archives. And that's all from us this week on Diffusion. Get this! If you sign up for Shopback at is.gd/perila, you get paid $5 and I get paid $5. We both come out ahead and you get big cashback discounts on your online shopping for brands like Amazon, eBay, AliExpress, and lots more. is.gd/perila. Are you a scientist, artist, biohacker, or maker who'd like to be interviewed about your work? Would your company like to sponsor Diffusion? Send your contributions, opinions, helpful suggestions, and donations to science@diffusionradio.com. That's science@diffusionradio.com. Please like the Diffusion Science Radio page on Facebook and rate the show on iTunes. Tell your friends. Follow me on Twitter @Ian Woolf. I produce Diffusion, which is broadcast around Australia to 28 stations on the Community Radio Network, including 2RBM in the Blue Mountains of New South Wales, 8CCC in Alice Springs and Tennant Creek, 2 NVR in Nambucca Valley, 3 NBR in the Mallee Border districts of Victoria and South Australia, City Park Radio 7LTN in Launceston, Tasmania, and 2XXFM in Canberra. Diffusion is syndicated globally on the National Science Foundation's Science 360 internet radio station and also on astronomy.fm. Subscribe to the podcast on the Diffusion website, www.diffusionradio.com. That's www.diffusionradio.com. Check the website for links, photos and videos about this week's show. If you enjoyed the show, you can explore more than 1,000 previous episodes archived on diffusionradio.com, where the shows are labelled by keywords so you can focus in on the stories you want to hear. Join my patrons at patreon.com/diffusionradio. Make a donation through paypal.me/IanWolf. Support Diffusion by buying from the affiliate links at diffusionradio.com/support. Subscribe to the Diffusion YouTube channel at youtube.com/c/diffusionradio. I'm Ian Woolf. Join us inside your audio device of choice for more science wondering next week on Diffusion Science Radio.
Science is fun. It helps you to learn, to know, and to appreciate. When you study science, you may go on field trips. You discover the marvelous interrelationships between all living things. You learn to read the history of the Earth as it is written in rocks and fossils. You find out what makes things tick, everything from a molecule to a living organism. In the study of science is found the most useful and satisfying knowledge of man. Knowledge of his physical world, its past, its present, and its future. And in your moments of relaxation, now and in the years to come, you will find the study of science leading you into fascinating pursuits. Photography, collecting. Why study science? Study science because you will find in the study of science a richer, more rewarding life.